Hello, and welcome to Nutrition and Menu Planning. I'll be your instructor for the next 16 weeks, and I want to share a little bit about myself just to give you an opportunity to do the same so that we can all get to know one another. It's my goal to try to duplicate as much as possible the experience we have in face-to-face classes. I've been an RDN, or Registered Dietitian Nutritionist, for over 35 years and have been focusing on culinary nutrition for at least 25 of those years. Growing up in the Northeast, we always traveled by car. On many outings, when my sister and I were younger, we would moan, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" Our parents' response was always, "Yep, we're here." We would sit up eagerly and look out the window. Then, in a disappointed voice, would say, "This isn't where we're going." And our parents would reply, "But this is where we are." We often do this in real life. We start down a path toward better health, start a running program, attempt to lose weight, or maybe even complete our degree. Somehow we long for that destination, the completion, and believe we won't be happy until we feel better, or run our 3 miles, or until we lose weight, or until we complete that degree, or even nutrition class. We stand on the scale every day and we drive to class and ask, "Are we there yet?" The answer is usually no, or slow progress. Day after day, we're so impatient to reach our goal, and we convince ourselves that we're never going to achieve our goal. Every attempt proves we're not there yet. Whether it's a long car ride or changing our health habits or completing a nutrition class, the key is to enjoy the journey. Refusing to feel happy until you reach your destination is the worst possible approach. Waiting to celebrate until the end means missing all the wonderful opportunities along the way. If you can shift your perspective and begin looking at each class as an opportunity to grow in a new way, going from "this is a mandatory class I have to take" to "I can gain so much professionally and personally from the knowledge I gain," the semester will go by so much faster and we'll all have a lot more fun and we'll have enjoyed the journey. And honestly, in this class, there is so much to be gained personally and professionally. I've had students who've used the information to lose weight, to just overall get healthy, and also to learn to decipher misinformation from the popular press, to help understand medical issues they were facing, or to go work in a gluten-free pastry shop, to changing career paths to becoming a registered dietitian. So there's a never-ending, path here that you can take. Many of you may have had a personal experience with nutrition. Maybe one of your family members have diabetes, or maybe a friend has gone through gastric bypass surgery or suffered from an eating disorder. Maybe you know someone that has high blood pressure or, any number of concerns. My father died of a massive heart attack at age 33. Early on, I wanted to learn all I could to prevent an early fatality, which is one of the reasons I studied nutrition and dietetics in college. You must have some preconceived ideas about nutrition. Many people verbalize that they've learned nutrition from a trusted friend, or they hear it on TV, or maybe read about it in magazines, or even Dr. Google. But let's begin by realizing that, number one, the press is out to sell magazines and information. And maybe be the first to break a news story, sell magazines, and what your friend told you is really a testimonial based on his or her experience and not evidence-based scientific information. That is the basis for our nutrition and menu planning class. Nutrition is a science and not opinion. So that is really what we are going to be doing in this class this semester, is really talking about the science of nutrition. So my goal for you is to forget everything you learned about nutrition and learn it here. And then you can decipher all the misinformation that's out there in the real world. In Chapter 1, we're going to be covering just a basic introduction to nutrition, and what it does is lays the foundation for the rest of the semester. And I like to think about our book in terms of like 3 different sections. In the very beginning, we're going to lay the foundation for nutrition and learn about calories and protein and carbohydrate and fat. And then the second half of the semester, we're going to build in techniques of healthy cooking. And then in the end, we will apply all the information that we've learned and actually apply it to situations where people may have, a medical issue that you need to be aware of when they enter your restaurant, or maybe you're going to be cooking for a client that has a medical problem. So we'll be able to apply all the information we learned throughout the semester. So our learning objectives for Chapter 1, we're going to explain why nutrition is important and, what it really means to have a healthy diet. We're going to talk about different terms that you may not have heard that are very important throughout the semester. We're going to discuss factors that influence what people eat and identify, what is a calorie and what influences how many calories people need in a day. We're also going to talk a little bit about digestion and absorption of food in the GI tract. We won't spend a lot of time on the science of nutrition in terms of the body. We're going to talk more about practical methods and explain how you as a culinary professional, may run into nutritional situations and why it's important to have at least an understanding so that the clients that you're dealing with, that you have a better understanding of what they're going through. So what is nutrition? And what is a healthy diet? When I see clients in a one-on-one counseling session, that's probably the number one question that I get asked. What is healthy? And what does all that mean? Nutrition, first of all, is a young science, and it's a science that studies nutrients and other substances in food, and mostly how they affect the body in terms of health and disease. So 20 years ago, we hadn't heard about antioxidants and phytochemicals, and that's why we encourage people to eat whole food and healthy, wholesome food, because there's so many wonderful, nourishing substances in food that work synergistically together to provide, the nutrients and the impact that it needs for your body to promote growth and maintenance. Nutrition explores your food choices and the type of eating plan you eat. I hesitate using the word diet because many people, when they hear the word diet, automatically assume that we're talking weight loss. But what I'm referring to when I say the type of diet you eat, it's really an eating plan, another way of saying the type of diet that you eat. So we're studying the nutrients, how it relates to health and disease, and it's a very, very impactful science, always and ever changing, which is what makes it really exciting. Why is it important? Diet has several meanings. The food and beverages that you consume in a day, and also it could mean weight-reducing diet, often thought of in a very negative way. Most of the lifestyle diseases in our country, heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, many cancers, can be prevented by choosing a healthier lifestyle. This may come as a surprise to many of you. A lot of students over the semester will say, I just never had any idea that what I ate impacted, the outcome of my health. The Center for Disease Control statistics show that the prevalence of obesity was 35.7% among young adults aged 20 to 39 years, 42.8% among middle-aged adults 40 to 59 years, and 41% among older adults 60 and over. So you can see how important nutrition can be, especially if people understand and get the right information, how we can maybe turn the tide on these numbers and statistics, because it's become almost an epidemic. For children and adolescents aged 2 to 19 years, the prevalence of obesity was 18.5% and affected about 13.7 million of children and adolescents. That's 13.9% among 2 to 5-year-olds and 18.4% among 6 to 11-year-olds and 20.6% among 12 to 19-year-olds. So when we're referring to, nutrition and why it's important, Americans, have so many preventable diseases that are related to a poor diet and also not getting enough exercise. So there's a lot we can learn about and a lot we can do. When I think about the way of the current American diet, I actually call it the SAD diet. And I refer to that being the standard American diet. When we look at what we actually need, we're really low in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, low-fat dairy products. And when you evaluate the typical American diet, the typical standard American diet, it's very high in calories, very high in sodium, saturated fat, refined grains, added sugars. These are all things we're going to be covering within the next couple chapters and talk about in great detail so that you understand and can help make, better choices and also for the healthier clients. But, we want to make a change there so that we can really impact our society in a better way. When we talk about a healthy diet is one that's higher in vegetables and fruit, whole grains, low-fat or skim dairy products, seafood, beans and peas, and also nuts. And then obviously moderate in alcohol because alcohol doesn't contribute to the nutritional value. And then a healthy diet is also lower in red and processed meats, like luncheon meats, salami, bologna, those kinds of things. It's not that you have to give up everything or give up these things, but it's important to shift the perspective and begin to eat foods that are a little bit more wholesome and not as highly processed. And we're going to talk about processing in a little bit. But it's really important to think about, eating things that are more whole grain instead of refined. Having, fruit as our sweet and not so many sugary drinks and foods and candy and pies and cakes and cookies. The evidence examined by the 2015 Dietary Guidelines Committee identified this as a target for what we need for a healthy diet. You can combine all of these foods in a variety of flexible ways to achieve a healthy, balanced diet and also meet the needs of those with specific dietary preferences and cultural traditions. So you don't have to eliminate. Many times I like to promote nutrition as a way of adding foods in. So instead of thinking about a healthy diet as something that you have to give up or something that's negative, I want to put a positive spin on it and make sure that everybody leaves here with a positive attitude about what can I add to my diet to make it a lot healthier as opposed to what do I have to give up. Because in reality, all foods fit. And that's something that I want to reiterate over the semester. All foods fit into a healthy diet. You just have to learn the quantity, the frequency, and you have to look at how foods are prepared. So obviously you can't, include, high-fat snack foods every day in your diet, but you can certainly work those in on occasion, just to give you an example. So there's quite a few terms, food and nutrition terms, that I think it's important to learn and understand. One of my favorites that you'll hear me talk about throughout the semester is whole food. What do we mean by whole food? I had a student once ask if whole food meant if I ate the whole box of something. Probably just a joke. But whole foods or wholesome foods are foods that are pretty much as we get them from nature, not referring to the name of the grocery store chain either. We have Whole Foods grocery store chain, but here we're referring to foods that is closest to the earth. So your eggs, your fresh fruits and vegetables, beans and peas, whole grains, fresh meat, and also milk. So whole foods are really what we want to use as the basis for a healthy diet. The other term that's really important is processed foods. Processing comes in many different forms. Foods that are prepared using milling, like for instance, taking grains of wheat and taking it to the mill to process it into flour. That's processing. Cooking is processing. Freezing is processing. Canning, dehydrating, or maybe even culturing milk with bacteria to make yogurt. Those are all processes. It could be bread, cookies, cereal, sauces, baking mixes, frozen entrees. There's a ton of different processed food. Before the Industrial Revolution, the food supply contained mostly whole, farm-grown foods, but today's supermarket shelves are stocked with a lot of the highly processed food. I want you to think about, if anyone can guess, what percentage of food that we shop for in the grocery store today didn't even exist 100 years ago. Most people don't guess correctly. The answer is 90%. So when it comes to choosing our food, whole foods are the best choice. But when we think about processing, it can be negative if we want it. It could be more positive because in some cases, processing helps retain nutrients, such as freshly picked vegetables that are frozen. So when I use the word processed, I'm referring to the actual processing that is done to food. Some of it is very good, and some of it, what I call the highly processed food, may not be something that we want to focus on as a regular, everyday, healthy diet. So whole foods are generally not processed or refined. Processed foods are prepared using different techniques, whether it's milling, canning, freezing. And some of those, when they do process them, they have to add ingredients, which then makes it maybe less desirable. In the case of a frozen dinner or a canned good, many times sodium compounds are added, not only for flavoring, but also for preservative. So if you're dealing with a client that has high blood pressure or maybe congestive heart failure, then maybe those kinds of foods are not a good choice at all. If you have a person that's retaining a lot of fluid, the sodium could be, causing a lot more fluid retention. So it's important to understand that there's both, and there may be, situations where we want to include processed food, but you have to be aware of when something is done to preserve it, then it may change how it affects, people in general. Two other words that are very important are enriched and fortified. Enriched is really when a food is enriched with nutrients that are added to replace those that are lost. So for instance, when they take wheat and they process it into flour, during the processing, nutrients are lost. So by law, they have to be added back in. So that's what enrichment is. Fortification, on the other hand, is when nutrients are added that weren't normally present. So like, for instance, orange juice can be fortified with calcium. And that may be a good thing for people who aren't getting enough calcium. So they might choose the orange juice at the grocery store that has the addition or fortification of the calcium. Probably the most notable is iodized salt. Back in the early 20s, we had a problem in our country with iodine deficiency, and a lot of people were getting goiters. And in the process, they determined that it might be better to iodize salt, and so that's really considered a fortified food. Milk is also fortified with vitamin D, and also a lot of breakfast cereals are fortified with vitamin A. So fortification is when nutrients are added. Enrichments are when they're added to replace nutrients that were lost in processing. Two other words that are sort of used as a health halo, I call them. Natural can mean that there's no added colors or artificial flavors or maybe even synthetic ingredients. When it comes to meat, no artificial ingredients or added colors and maybe minimal processing. But here's the caveat. Natural is not really a regulated term and is often used in marketing as a health halo or really to imply that foods are not processed. It's used a lot in marketing. It's used as a way of talking about ingredients that are all natural products, and conveying an appeal to nature. But the lack of standard means that the term really doesn't assure very much. The USDA partnered with the Food and Drug Administration to develop and issue regulations in appropriate usage of natural labels. The Food and Drug Administration does not have specific rules for natural labeling. So be wary of that term. Organic foods are produced without using conventional pesticides, petroleum-based fertilizers, bioengineering, iodizing radiation. So organic foods and the term organic has become, extremely popular. Organic foods are produced by farmers who emphasize the use of renewable resources and the conservation of soil and water to improve the environment for future generations. So the concept is, extremely important. Organic meat, poultry, eggs, and dairy products come from animals that are given no antibiotics or growth hormones, and they also have access to the outdoors. Organic food is produced without using most conventional pesticides or fertilizers with synthetic ingredients. And of course you hear me say the word most. Organic food is produced without using most conventional pesticides, fertilizers made with synthetic ingredients, bioengineering, and ionized radiation. Before a product can be labeled organic, a government-approved certifier has to inspect the farm where all the food's grown, and they have to make sure that the farmer is following all the rules that are necessary to meet the USDA organic standards. And that's why generally when you're shopping for organic food, you'll notice that the prices are a little bit higher. So when you have organic foods, you'll see a label, such as the one that we're looking at on the screen. Products labeled 100% organic must contain only organically produced ingredients. Products labeled organic must consist of at least 95% organically produced ingredients. And then, of course, products meeting the requirements for 100% organic and organic may display the USDA organic seal in the slide. It's very important to understand the labeling. So when it says 100% organic, it must contain only organic produced ingredients. When we're talking about particular products, like processed products, the ones that contain 70% organic ingredients can use the phrase made with organic ingredients and list up to 3 of the organic ingredients or food groups on the label. I know it sounds very confusing, but it is an option. Processed products that contain less than 70% organic ingredients cannot use the term organic. So, do they taste better? Are they more nutritious? There's no solid body of research yet that shows organic foods are more nutritionally advantageous over conventionally grown. And I think a lot of people would beg to differ with that, but when you look at the science of nutrition, there's no solid body of research that proves it. It may be wonderful for the environment and a very healthy way to go, but it's really important to consider, feeding populations. Many people can't afford organic, so you don't want to have an elitist attitude that portrays only purchasing organic products when some people can't afford it. They might not even eat any fruits and vegetables, thinking that the conventional route is not the way to go. There's a lot of heated opinions about organic and bioengineering and ionized radiation, but I think it's really important to consider what the science says and realize that if a person's budget doesn't allow them to choose organic, that eating fresh fruits and vegetables are still very, very important. From a safety perspective, it's very important to encourage people when they're buying conventional produce to just wash it under cold running water. I have a designated scrub brush that I use to wash all of my produce before I use it in cooking or eat it. So how about taste? It's taste really, I think, is a matter of personal preference. A lot of people seem to think that organic tastes better, but taste will vary among any fresh produce, depending on freshness, the seeds that are used, where they're grown. A lot of different factors factor into that. Organic is something that, we will continue to talk about throughout the semester. Another term that we hear often in relation to food, especially produce, is the word superfood. Superfoods, certain foods have been promoted as superfoods because they're nutrient rich and they promote health. And many of the health promoting ingredients in superfoods are actually called phytochemicals. I like to think of it as nutrichemicals. Phytochemicals sounds like an industrial cleaner, but basically it's just compounds in plant foods such as fruits and vegetables that promote health and may even decrease risk of certain disease. Some examples of foods that naturally contain lots of phytonutrients and have health benefits are foods like nuts. Due to the type of fat that nuts contain, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, they also contain phytochemicals that may be heart healthy. Another food that might have health benefits is cacao or cocoa, which is used to make chocolate from the cacao beans. Cacao is a rich source of antioxidants that may help protect blood vessels and heart, and dark chocolate especially contains more cacao than milk chocolate and therefore would contain more antioxidants. Something like chocolate would fit into a healthy diet in moderate amounts. Tea is another one. Scientists have investigated the potential benefits of both green and black tea because of the rich sources of polyphenols. They act as an antioxidant in the body. Green tea goes through a fermentation process in order to be made into black tea. Black tea also contains polyphenols, but not as much as the green tea. It's the polyphenols in the tea that appears to have positive effect on heart health, and it may also have a cancer-fighting role. Spinach would be another one, any dark greens. Spinach is a powerhouse of antioxidants. It contains lutein, which is a phytochemical that seems to protect the eyes from cataracts and macular degeneration. And those are things that affect the central part of the retina, which leads to loss of sharp vision. So a lot of foods are given the superfood status, but I like to think of it that all fruits and vegetables are superfoods and that each one contains a lot of those phytonutrients and antioxidants that keep us healthy. Another thing to consider regarding the term superfood is that it's so important to realize that when you eat food in combination and have meals or menus that are planned around all the different food groups, nutrients work synergistically together so that when you are eating, you're getting the best possible combination of nutrients that Mother Nature provides. This particular slide just goes through some of the different classes of phytochemicals, and you can see based on the different produce that they're using, just gives you more information about the color. So for instance, the foods that have a lot of carotenoids are mostly yellow and orange and red pigmented fruits and vegetables. There's obviously some green, but the health effects of these carotenoids are that they act as an antioxidant, possibly reducing the risk of cancer. The best way to think about an antioxidant, here's a good example. If you take a bite of an apple and you put it on the counter, what happens to it? Over time, it's going to turn brown because it's oxidizing. But if you take lime juice, lemon juice, some sort of acidic antioxidant, it's not going to turn brown. So that's what vegetables and fruit do in our body from the inside out. They act as antioxidants. There's a lot of free radicals floating around in the environment that attack our body. So everyone has the potential for having heart disease and cancer, but if you have a diet that is full of these, phytochemicals and antioxidants, you can better prepare your body for fighting off all those free radicals. So again, you'll notice that it's important to have a rainbow of color in your diet, and that's exactly what this page is showing us, that whether it's carotenoids or flavonoids, indoles, allicin, and even though allicin group doesn't have a lot of color, things like garlic, chives, leeks, onions, scallions, shallots, anything in that aromatic vegetable category can be very beneficial in possibly preventing cancer, lowering cholesterol and blood pressure, stimulating the immune system. But the thing to remember is it's important to have a healthy diet for the most part, and also incorporate activity. There's not magic to it, and we always like to use the terms, it may do this, it may do that. But the thing to remember is not everybody who eats that way is going to be 100% healthy. But the reality is, I'd much rather eat my way through life, having a healthy diet in hopes that it'll prevent different lifestyle diseases, than go through my life eating junk food and knowing what that's doing to my body. When we talk about what's considered ideal for our diet or our eating plan, there's 3 words that are very, very important to remember. Your diet should be moderate. Moderate meaning avoid excessive amounts of calories of any particular food or group or nutrient. So moderation mentality. A nice little pearl for you to remember is think about moderation and not consider the moderation mentality is really the way to go. When we think about moderate, an example of moderate would be to choose the appropriate portion sizes of different foods and indulge only occasionally in foods that don't contribute to good health. Balance is another term that it's really important to remember, and that is just choosing foods to provide, the best nutrients in the right portions. So we want a balance of nutrients throughout the day. We want a balance of nutrients throughout the different meals that you're eating, and that means that you want a variety of foods from each food group, and that's why the last term is varied. We want to eat a wide selection of food. And the reason this is so important is that there's no such thing as a perfect food. So if you're one of those people that limit yourself to 10 foods, you're obviously limiting yourself in terms of nutrients. By eating a variety of food, you're more likely to get the nutrients you need in the right amounts. And a good way to do that is to eat with the seasons. So think about it. Right now we're in the summer season and we're getting a lot of our berries and melons and, varied produce. And then think about how the produce section at the grocery store or the farmer's market changes over to our fall selection, which would be a variety of different types of apples and winter squash. So when you're eating with the seasons, you're getting a wide selection of foods that contributes to a wide selection of nutrition. Okay, so why do we eat the foods that we do? There's a lot of different reasons that come into play when we are choosing food. It could be flavor, it could be the convenience of it, it could be our demographics. Think about the different regions of the country and what's, really important in people's diets. If you're living in the South, the diet consists of a lot of chilies and a lot of, different food compared to in the Northeast where it's a little bit more bland. Culture affects our diet, different religions. We're going to break these all up into different slides so that we can attack it a little bit further. Flavor, I like to think of as probably one of the most important things. When we think about the word flavor, it really includes taste, smell, texture, or mouthfeel, temperature, and sound. So it's not just what the food tastes like, but you know, how it feels when it's in our mouth. And it really is a combination of all the senses. And that's when we know that, um, you know, it's really appealing, to, especially healthy food is appealing to all the senses. And it's extremely important to have texture and, you know, think about mouthfeel and all those when we're planning our menus. The most important consideration when we choose what we're going to eat is taste. And, you know, there was a time when chefs and dietitians really, I can honestly say, didn't see eye to eye. It was probably chefs not really appreciating what dietitians brought to the table. And it was because many times the culinary professional would think that dietitians are taking away everything that makes food taste good. And there are still people that, you know, think that healthy food doesn't taste delicious and good. But, you know, there's so many things to create taste. There's herbs and spices and aromatic vegetables. And, you know, there's a lot of different things. So I want you to consider that when you are, you know, feeding your clients, when you're preparing your food, when you're planning your meals, taste is most important. Even if we're talking about a nutrition class and healthy eating, taste is still the number one consideration. If food doesn't taste good, it doesn't matter how nutritional it is. We all have quite an array of taste buds on our tongue and our cheeks and throat and the roof of our mouth. Taste buds are scattered all around, and taste buds kind of resemble the sections of an orange. Each taste bud houses about 60 to 100 receptor cells in our nose and our cheeks and throat and the roof of our mouth. And the body regenerates taste buds every 3 days. When we're feeding different age groups, like for instance children, you'll notice that they frown on eating certain foods, or they go through these phases where they won't eat certain, especially vegetables. And it's primarily because they have so many more taste buds than adults that you can only imagine that some food probably does taste better. Because of this, you know, they're often, you know, pegged as picky eaters. And that's why when you're a child and you're not eating certain food, I always encourage adults to try it again, because your tastes change over the years and become more educated. So I always like to think of an adult palate as being a little bit more educated. So it's important to always try to give it a go. And when you're dealing with children, in the feeding in the feeding world, it's really important to you know, have them try it, give it a go, give it a taste, and not force it or make it into a power struggle. There's 5 primary taste sensations: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. And I think we all understand the first 4. The last one, probably culinary professionals have been introduced to the concept, but umami is the 5th basic taste, and it differs from the traditional sweet, sour, salty, and bitter because it provides more of a savory, almost sometimes like a meaty sensation. Umami is actually a Japanese word, and the taste is evident in many Japanese ingredients and foods like seaweed, dashi stock, soy sauce, mushrooms, and then also, you know, more familiar foods like tomatoes and Parmesan cheese. So when you add these to recipes, you know, chefs can reduce the fat and salt content of food without sacrificing flavor. So when you build that umami flavor through cooking techniques, you know, it's really a good way to almost create a healthier technique in cooking. Any process that breaks down protein, such as drying or aging, curing, and slow cooking, increases umami because the glutamate is released from the protein. So when we're talking about umami, you know, it can be a really powerful taste in cooking. I had a client one time who is a professional ice skater who actually had a head injury from a fall, and she lost her sense of taste. And we really explored the whole umami concept because she could actually enjoy food better because of the, sensation that she would achieve from, umami-rich foods. Umami, another thing or taste sensation is the heat of peppers. The heat from peppers is actually called capsaicin, which is an enzyme in pepper that causes that heat sensation. So it's not really felt by the taste buds, but it's actually a pain receptor in the mouth that senses the heat. So we have a lot of different things in our toolbox to really create flavor and make things taste really, really delicious in our profession. The next consideration for why we choose food is smell. Smell is really important to taste. Think about it. The first thing you did when you were getting ugly, awful cough syrup when you were a child is you were told to close your nose or pinch your nose. Smell is so important because there's receptors in your nose that can distinguish a lot of different scents. And so while you're cooking and while you're eating, you're smelling the food, and it also helps to detect, negative things that you don't want to put in your mouth. So smell is very important. And then also texture and mouthfeel. This, I think, is really especially important, especially from a nutritional point of view, because you could eat soft things all day long and not feel satisfied. But when you have things that have texture, it takes you a little bit longer to eat it. It gives you that sensation of noshing, which from a health point of view tends to slow your eating down a little bit and really make it a little bit more appealing in terms of the number of calories that you're consuming. But texture is really, really important, and it influences whether you like food or whether you don't. Many people say they don't like a certain food, and it's not necessarily the flavor, but maybe they're just not a person who really likes a lot of texture. Even carbonated beverages have texture, which is the tingle in your mouth as you drink them. So there's a lot of different textures. Sight and sound, obviously we eat with our eyes. And that's why, especially when we're planning meals, color is so important because it tells you about the flavor and the quality of the food. Think about a, brilliant red, bright, juicy red watermelon, or, a nice salad with a lot of different ingredients in it. It just makes it so much more appealing for you to want to eat it. So when you're planning meals, you want to consider eye appeal, as in color and various shapes, consistency, and also how it's arranged on the plate. So, it's real important. And then sound comes into being with things like a sizzling plate of fajitas. When anything that sizzles or that smokes, they're using a lot of smoke these days, even in cocktails. It really just sort of stimulates your appetite by, seeing all that.